or whatever the intentions of this bill, it is very hard to escape the conclusion that this is SNP Green grandstanding. This SNP Green coalition government are treating this Parliament with contempt for the sake of a headline. This is a bill that will create homelessness. It's reckless, and it's certainly not evidence-led policy. Any truncation of the legislative process is bound to mean that scrutiny is not what it should be, especially given the consequences which will flow from the enactment of this flawed bill. Mark the warnings of the expert voices in the sector. They could not be clearer. And deep down, I can't help believe, Deputy Presiding Officer, that the more thoughtful members of the SNP and Labour know the grave concerns being raised from the sector are well grounded, as was cited by Willie Rennie in the evidence of the Cairn Housing Group. I will.
Minister.
I'm grateful to the member. He mentions experts in the sector. Does he accept that tenants are experts in how the rented sector works and that tenant organisations have been crying out for this?
Stephen Kerr.
Of course I accept that tenants are a very important part of the rental housing market. But listen to the consequences that are going to flow from this piece of flawed legislation. I will.
Michelle Thompson.
Lack of scrutiny, does that mean now he regrets the rush of blood to the head of his Tory Chancellor and the impact it's had on costs for housing providers?
Stephen Kerr, and give you the time back for his intervention.
What that's got to do with this bill, I can't possibly answer for the logic that drives that kind of political point scoring for the sake of it. Not only are the SNP treating this Parliament with contempt, but I put it to the Chamber, they're also treating the tenants and students across Scotland with contempt by pushing through a policy which international case study after international case study shows does not work. And it doesn't work as it reduces the supply of rented accommodation and increases the likelihood of homelessness. It doesn't work. It reduces the maintenance of properties and increases the number of tenants and students living in lower quality accommodation. It doesn't work because it reduces the incentive for landlords to invest in their properties to improve energy efficiency, increasing the energy bills of tenants and students and increasing the difficulty of reaching our net zero targets. All of this at a time when the rental market is already shrinking.
John Mason.
I thank the member for giving way. Would he accept that at least some landlords have not just been increasing rent to match their costs, but have been increasing rent to make a super profit?
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I'm talking about the evidence of the general market situation. If there are specific examples that the member is aware of where that kind of ruthless landlord exists, then I'm sure something can be done about that. But this is to take a sledgehammer to crack that particular nut. Now, at the same time, Scotland's universities' funding from the SNP Green Scottish Government is being cut in real terms. And this is a time when Scotland's universities are being bailed out effectively by fee-paying international students. And housing is already being squeezed. It's already been mentioned. Students at Glasgow University being encouraged to withdraw from their courses or to defer a year of their studies. Students being forced to take up accommodation 30 miles away from their place of study. And my friend Miles Briggs mentioned the example of the Irish case study. The Irish Economic and Social Research Institute and the Irish Department of Housing have both stated categorically that whatever the benefits that are promised around these policies are, they say, quote, these measures come with supply-side health warnings. They have been shown to lower investment and maintenance in buildings and lower overall rental supply. Our friends in the Republic of Ireland also don't need to look at international examples to determine how disastrous policy rent controls are. They're living with them. They introduced them in 2016, and the Irish have seen the number of homes available to rent plummet. And as of August this year, only 716 homes were available to rent in a country with a population of 5.1 million people. A byproduct of this shocking increase is homelessness. Again, according to the Department of Housing, figures in July this year in Ireland, there were 10,668 adults and children who were homeless across the Republic of Ireland. This is a record high, a 30% increase on the homeless figure since May 2021. It's just not, and it's not just Ireland. The abhorrent consequences of rent control can be seen clearly in any city or country that has introduced them. Stockholm, the average wait time for rent-controlled apartments is now over 9 years. The introduction of rent controls in New York led to more than 125,000 people being homeless, and in California, over 100,000 people. So we have University Scotland, the Minister shaking his head, but we have University Scotland's response to the bill and their warning of unpalatable unintended consequences. First, University of Scotland makes the point that it has already acted to protect students for the next academic year, as rent, including bills such as electricity, are fixed for the next academic year, so will not increase regardless of inflation or changes to gas and electricity prices. Second, if the rent freeze lasts more than 6 months, it could mean that the cost of running student accommodation will become financially unviable, putting jobs at risk and further reducing supply. Third, this is from University of Scotland. Third, and I ask the Minister to make the Government's position very clear on this point, University of Scotland state that banning eviction would put students at risk if universities are unable to evict an individual whom they believe poses a risk of sexual or physical violence to other students. I'm willing to take an intervention.
Minister.
I'm grateful. The member will be well aware that, as with the temporary restrictions under the coronavirus legislation, criminal and antisocial behaviour, and that's not just criminal, antisocial behaviour as well, is very clearly exempted from the moratorium on eviction, just as it was in the previous emergency legislation.
Stephen Kerr, would be grateful if you could begin to wind up, please.
If an individual is believed to pose a risk in terms of sexual or physical violence, they can be evicted. Is that what the Minister is saying? Can you shake your head, Minister? Well, that is not what I'm asking. So I think we need some clarification from the Minister on that. This is what University of Scotland are asking. If the universities, I'm sorry to indulge the patience of the Deputy Presiding Officer. Fourth, if the universities can't ask students to depart accommodation on terms agreed, then this will put vitally important revenue-generating summer events at risk. It will also put at risk accommodation for the following academic year's first-year student intake. That's a very important consideration. And finally, University of Scotland believe that the focus should be on long-term strategy and not on this emergency bill that has had so little strategy. I think the Minister should deal with each of these concerns expressed by University of Scotland in his or her response to this debate. And at that, I will